It will make your head spin. I literally have rocket scientists working for me.
Oh.
And so when you're in a room with rocket scientists, a PhD in aerospace engineering, and they're trying to explain it as something to you, it's easy to feel intimidated or overwhelmed. What I tell people that when they become a senior executive or a senior leader, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You don't really want me dissecting a rocket engine, quite frankly. But I need to know enough to understand to ask critical questions of, hey, did you think about this? Or what additional resources do you really need to take that exploitation and that analysis to the next level?
I'm Rachel Coble.
And I'm Liz Dean.
Welcome to Mock It. This podcast interviews industry experts from AI innovators to UX architects to nonprofit leaders and lots of people in between.
We explore the back of the napkin ideas that impact the nation, so you don't have to dig for the discoveries yourself. Enjoy and don't forget to like and subscribe. Today, Rachel and I had the pleasure of welcoming Steve Rush, who is mouthful, director of the Missile and Space Intelligence Center for the Defense Intelligence Agency. We talk a lot about serious items with the warfighter, but we also have a lot of fun and lighthearted topics. So it made our conversation with him a really good blast.
I wonder how he puts that on his resume, because that is a lot of words. Hopefully he uses the acronyms. We do mention Buc-ee's in this episode, so if you are a fan, definitely stick around until the end.
Thanks for joining us today. So one of the things we want to talk about is you've had a very long-standing career. First, you were in the military for 21 years, and then you've been at the DIA for an additional 15 years. A lot of the people we talked to have had different tenures at various organizations. You've been sort of, you have a very long military career. Now you have a post-military career that's also been very extensive with one agency. Do you want to tell us about how that's been and the pros and cons of navigating your career like that?
Yeah, I don't think I ever thought about it being such a long career with one organization until you proposed the question.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's an interesting perspective. I know a lot of the younger generation these days seem to like to, spend a few years with one organization or a company and then move on. And I've had such a diversity of assignments and experiences in both my military career and now my civilian career with the Defense Intelligence Agency. So it's never really felt like I've been with one organization for an extended period of time. Every position I've had, both in the military and then in the civilian sector, working for the Defense Intelligence Agency, has been so radically different than my previous positions that it feels like I'm just constantly learning and growing and experiencing challenges. So I've never really felt a desire to either, leave the Army until it was time for retirement or leave the Defense Intelligence Agency, because I've just had so many different opportunities to change positions and learn and grow that it seemed like I'm constantly changing positions and continuing to grow and learn. So until you really put it in front of me, I didn't realize I've been stagnant for 37 years.
I wouldn't call it stagnant. I think you came up with a good point in that you've had a bunch of different careers within the DIA. And I think that that's one thing, a really good pro of government is you can stay in an agency and have a vast career in one agency, which isn't quite the same for like a general corporate job.
Yeah, that's what I actually love about the Defense Intelligence Agency. And I loved about the military. You're able to move around from, different career fields, rebrand yourself, go to different geographic locations. So for me, it's always fun and exciting. And I think I could probably spend another 37 years, even though my wife would hate that, and still not be bored. So.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes you don't want to retire. My dad is still working. He's like, I love it.
Yeah, my dad's never going to retire either.
We have that same view here at the Missile and Space Intelligence Center where I'm working now. There's an old timers list. And so we have 50 plus employees that have been here between 29 and 37 years. I think there's a couple actually that are over 40 years. So I think the list was wrong when they shared it with me a couple of weeks ago.
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't know how I would feel about being on the old timers list. Really, can we call it like the wise owls or something? Like something.
In the military, they use the term graybeards, but then I feel like we're kind of being a little bit sexist. But military goes graybeards.
Oh, that is good to know. That's good to know. Learn new terms over here. Oh, go ahead, Liz.
I was going to say, so how do you think being a veteran shaped your experience at the DIA? And also, I guess you had a great foundation of having a longstanding career pre-DIA now leading into a longstanding career at DIA.
That's a very interesting question, Liz. I've spent some time thinking about that, both pre-retirement from the Army and then post-retirement. I didn't realize it at the time, but I think my experience in the military and the fact that I served in multiple joint duty assignments, so I had that experience of dealing not only with the Army, but with all of the different elements of the services. And then I served overseas. So I had a lot of experience working in an interagency environment. I think that helped ease my transition. What I found with a lot of my counterparts and peers is that for some people transitioning from an organization like the military, where you typically lead by positional authority or the rank that you wear, it's a little different sometimes. And some people have trouble transitioning into the civilian world. Or you can imagine if I tell somebody, if I scream and yell at people, I swear at them, I tell them to drop and give me 50 push-ups. On the civilian side, it's received a little differently than it was in the military. So I think my experience learning to lead through influence rather than positional authority or my rank really helped me in my transition, because I've seen a number of friends and colleagues that have struggled in that transition to the civilian sector because they still rely heavily on positional authority. In my experience, positional authority will only get you so far. It's great in a crisis, a life or death situation, where something really significant is on the line. But in day-to-day operations, I think people respect leaders who manage and lead more from personal authority or through influence rather than relying on positional authority and saying, hey, do this because I'm in charge or I'm the dad. And I said you have to. That's why.
Have you ever pulled the because I said so card in your life at
I certainly wouldn't be able to lie, because if my kids watch this, they'd say I did that a lot as a dad. I don't think I've ever said it in a work organization, certainly not on the civilian side. Probably early in my military career, I just would get frustrated with some young private and say, do it because I said so, just do it. Certainly I don't think in the last 25 plus years, either in the military or in my civilian side, have I resorted to, hey, do it because I'm the director of the Missile and Space Intelligence Center, or do it because I was the chief financial officer. I think I would be embarrassed if I had to do that in the workplace. It'd be a failure.
Something you think about when you fall asleep later. You're like, oh no.
Oh, no, I did that. I said, do it because I'm in charge.
Yeah. Well, that's good. You've brought up that you have a new role now. So for this role, supporting MSIC supports the warfighter and strategic competition. How do you envision your role furthering the mission of the nation, and particularly in the current global context of everything is, every year everything's a little crazy, but I feel like this year in particular, things are a little crazy around the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the craziest, most dynamic times that I'm sure that the world has experienced. I'm sure former leaders have felt the same way, but with things going on in Ukraine and with Russia, the big looming threat of China and the globalization that China is pushing, what's happening in Israel, and everybody sitting with bated breath, waiting to see what's going to happen with Iran's reaction to things. It's a pretty tense time. And so as the director of the Missile and Space Intelligence Center, we play a pivotal role in that. You mentioned the warfighter. We have direct connectivity with the warfighters. One of our biggest jobs is helping to protect the warfighter and make sure they have the information they need on foreign weapons systems. And at the same time, informing policymakers on what we believe is actually happening with some of these weapons systems. So I envision my role as a director of the Missile and Space Intelligence Center is really just to be the best cheerleader I can for the center in removing obstacles for our engineers and analysts that are really doing the hard work day to day. I'm not a technical expert. I haven't been a technical expert in a number of years. If you ask me today what I think my technical expertise is, it's leadership. It's understanding how the government and the organization functions and how to remove obstacles and barriers and how to get resources for the true technical subject matter experts. So that's really how I see my role as the director of the Missile and Space Intelligence Center. I'm a coach. I give the people the tools and techniques they need, and I give them the resources they need so they can go out in the field and play the game.
Is it ever stressful if you don't understand the technical side of something, but you're trying to give leadership on, like, how do you navigate talking to a tech person where you're trying to explain the leadership side of things and they're like, yeah, well, that's not really how that works.
Yeah, it can get a little bit stressful. And I think one of my biggest jobs, I think my last job as chief financial officer really set me up for success with this job, because I spent most of my time trying to translate finance and acquisition stuff to senior agency leadership and oversight, and then trying to explain leadership intent to technical subject matter experts who didn't necessarily understand why we were trying to do something or what we were trying to achieve. So I've spent a lot of my time as a senior executive really trying to bridge that gap between technical subject matter experts and leadership. So I think in that role, I feel very comfortable in that. I will tell you already, just in the week and a half I've been in the job, it will make your head spin. I literally have rocket scientists working for me. Oh. And so when you're in a room with rocket scientists, a PhD in aerospace engineering, and they're trying to explain it as something to you, it's easy to feel intimidated or overwhelmed. What I tell people that when they become a senior executive or a senior leader, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to get comfortable acknowledging what you don't know and trying to be brave enough to ask questions on technical things in a way that they can understand what your intent is and what you're trying to drive at. And then you have to be comfortable enough to be able to repeat some technical information, to be able to say, hey, I think you mean this. Am I on track with that? So it really is getting comfortable being uncomfortable, realizing you're not going to understand 100% of the technical information, but that's what you have those technical experts for. You don't really want me dissecting a rocket engine, quite frankly. But I need to know enough to understand, to ask critical questions of, hey, did you think about this? Or what additional resources do you really need to take that exploitation and that analysis to the next level? But it can be a little scary and intimidating. I'm not lying to you.
Oh man, I get nervous just talking to our subject matter experts on AI stuff. And here you are talking to rocket scientists.
AI ML is pretty scary out there, and it's got a lot of potential for good, but a lot of potential for bad. That's for sure.
Have you ever said something along the lines of explain it to me like I'm in kindergarten?
I have. I've tried to stop saying, give me the idiot's guide version, because that kind of dates me. I don't know that everybody knows what the idiot's guide version is. Sometimes I'll say now, hey, can you give me the YouTube version of that? Can you really explain it in a way that, a sixth grader can understand? Amazingly enough, our scientists and engineers and our analysts are really good about doing that naturally. And it's amazing.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it is. I'm actually dumbfounded. It's almost, I even asked them a couple of times during some of my transition briefs, hey, did somebody tell you to dumb this down so that I would understand it at my level? And they're like, no, why? And I'm like, well, you've done a phenomenal job. I actually understood about 85% of what you're saying. And they make it fun, which is really an interesting technique and talent for sure.
Oh, I love that. It reminds me of, oh my gosh, I can't think of his name right now. What's the science guy?
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
It's like
Science guy. All right.
It's like working with Bill Nye the Science Guy. Oh my gosh, I am very embarrassed that I forgot his name for a second.
We knew exactly what you were talking about. You gave great context clues.
You did a great job.
Yeah. So in your role, are you focusing more on policy, or are you focusing more on bringing resources to your new role, to the, the engineers, the rocket sciences, or is it kind of a mix of both? And how has kind of your knowing the ins and outs of being the CFO played a role if it's more of the resources side?
I bet you're good at budgeting.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully I'm good at budgeting. And I don't look at my personal bank account, that's for sure. But it's a balance of both, actually. Sometimes it's a matter of changing a policy because it's in the way or it's inhibiting our ability to do things. A great example of that is wanting to integrate more with our foreign partners. That requires sometimes it requires resources. Sometimes it also requires policy changes. Usually in a conflict situation like Ukraine, or when I served as a human operations cell chief in Afghanistan, at the action officer level, when you're in harm's way, people do a really good job of skirting around or navigating policy in an effective way. But sometimes our national policies get in our way. So one of the things the team here at the Missile and Space Intelligence Center brought to me early on is, how do we do better at sharing our analytic models with our foreign partners in a way that maintains national security, but helps our partners to be more effective. So that's a great example where they're looking for help from me in navigating our policy changes. So as you can imagine, that often involves getting approval and changes to law, which involves the Hill, getting the Department of Defense involved, getting the Director of National Intelligence involved, and often getting the Office of Management and Budget involved. And then also I see my role as making sure that MSIC has the resources, not only for today, but where they need to be in 2030, 2035, 2040. So I do spend a lot of time with that too. And when I say resources, it's not just dollars, it's also equipment, space, the new talent for the workforce. What are those things that the technical subject matter experts need so they can really focus on their mission and they're not distracted from taking care of administrative stuff or worrying about, okay, well, how am I going to afford to do this? Or how am I going to have the right facility to do this? So it is a mix of both resources and also of understanding policy. And I think it's critical to understanding how those things operate in the federal government. And that's where I think I bring value as the director of the Missile and Space Intelligence Center is I understand how resources work. I know what the budgetary cycle is. I know we're already almost too late to get resources for FY27. And my team is like, oh my gosh, we're almost already too late for 2027. And
Stressful.
so understanding those things. Yeah, it is. Understanding those things is critical, I think, in leading any large organization.
How did you make the leap going from a CFO to leading this organization? Like you personally, how did you know it was time to make that shift?
A variety of things to play into it. Listening to mentors. I believe strongly also in once you get comfortable in a position, it's probably time to look for a new position. I believe it's healthy to be uncomfortable in a position because if you're uncomfortable, you're learning and you're growing. One of my favorite authors, James Hunter, who wrote The Servant, he uses a phrase, you're either green and growing or you're rotting on the vine.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one.
Yeah. You really don't want to be rotting on the vine. If you ask my kids, they'd probably say I'm rotting on the vine, or ask one of my grandkids some days. But hopefully I'm still green and growing. But it's really, for me, my entire career, I've thought it's been important to kind of have not an exact end state, but an idea of where I wanted to be, at least knowing a general direction. I use it an example of if you want to go to California, you may have a specific destination in mind, like San Francisco, but along the way, that may change and you may end up deciding I really want to be in Idaho. But if you don't have a destination in mind, just a general destination, usually you kind of flop around aimlessly. So in my career, I've always tried to have a general direction of where I wanted to go. So when I was the chief financial officer, I knew I would only spend about 3 to 5 years in that position. And I started thinking about what'll be next? What are the skills that I need to do some of the things that I'd be interested in doing? And quite frankly, the stars aligned, and I've been thinking about I'd love to lead the Missile and Space Intelligence Center for about 10 years now.
Oh, cool.
Oh my gosh.
It's like a full circle moment.
It's kind of like a bucket list for me. And so to be here and leading this organization, I'll tell you, I fell in love with the organization 10 years ago when I first came to the Missile and Space Intelligence Center. And what I fell in love with was the passion and dedication to supporting the warfighter and giving them everything they need to do their mission and protect their lives. I've never walked around an organization where everybody is so energized by the mission as I have here at MSIC. And that motivated me 10 years ago. And I always thought to myself, what are the skills I need to maybe someday lead that organization? And the stars aligned. So I am humbled and proud to be here every single day. And I will try to bring the same drive and energy that our new officers and our more seasoned officers bring to the mission every day.
Well, congratulations. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's super
and
cool.
so brave. I feel like it's brave to know what your goals are and to act upon them.
That can be a challenge. I always tell people, though, and this is advice that was given to me early in my career, just have an end state, have an idea of the general direction you want to go, and never close any doors behind you, never burn any bridges. Always keep moving forward. And if your pathway changes, that's okay. If you had asked me 5 years ago where I thought my next assignment would be, I would have hoped to be competitive to be the chief of staff of the Defense Intelligence Agency. But my perspective changed a little bit during the pandemic, thanks to the fact my wife can telework full time. And suddenly I found myself freed by the idea I don't have to stay in the national capital region forever. I was like, wow, MSIC. I've always wanted to lead MSIC. What are the skills I need, and how can I add value to the MSIC mission set? And the stars aligned. And so while I had a pathway at DIA where I was trying to drive towards and achieve, I suddenly found myself, hey, my pathway, it's okay if it changes a little bit. And I couldn't be happier. So I think a key thing for new officers is have a path, a general direction you want to go, be open to that pathway changing, being open to input from mentors, and enjoy the journey.
Oh, I love that. You talked about the pandemic, and I feel like a lot of people's ideas of what they wanted shifted during that time. But have you noticed any like pros or cons of maybe some of the people that came into the workforce during that time, like how they work, or do you think they're behind? Do you think they actually have like better skills because they've been able to be more flexible and you've been able to get a wider range of people across the United States? Or what has that been like working with people who started during the pandemic?
Yeah, first of all, I sincerely empathize with people that had to start working the pandemic because it was a totally different environment. We have some officers that, spent their last 2 years of college totally virtual, didn't have the same experiences. When they onboarded with us, some of them only had half a day of an onboarding session. There are a lot of things that were just different during that period. And because of the restrictions on the amount of people we could have in the workspace in order to protect the workforce, there wasn't as much cross-training and collaboration that they were exposed to like they normally would be. I think we're honestly just recovering from the pandemic. And there are some officers that I think feel like they missed out on the experience because they didn't have that connective tissue that previous officers had. So certainly our supervisors have felt like some of those officers, it's not like they don't have the skills needed to do the job. They absolutely have the skills needed to do the job. But a lot of our supervisors do feel like we did a disservice to the officers that joined us during that time period because we couldn't meet in large groups. The officers couldn't travel. They didn't have as many collaborative experiences, so there wasn't as much cross-training with their peers and their supervisors. So it's definitely something that I think is going to take a couple more years to get over. And we recognize that it's not the employee's fault that they joined during a once in 100 years pandemic. And how do we make those experiences better going forward for those officers? But yeah, I certainly empathize with folks that had to join a workforce during that time.
All a little trauma bonded together.
Do you have advice for people who maybe want to close the gap a little bit? Any trainings or certificates that you think are always good to have in your back pocket?
So for me, I think, here at the Missile and Space Intelligence Center, we get folks that are deep technical experts. They're like top of their field in engineering, whether that's astrophysics, whether that's electrical engineering. They are the top of the field. And then they come to the Missile and Space Intelligence Center and they realize, wow, I knew everything about my field. And now I know nothing about the intelligence community.
Wow.
And so the recommendation I have for our officers here at MSIC is take those opportunities. The natural tendency is they love the techie stuff. But take those opportunities to learn more about the intelligence community, and then also to take the opportunity, especially if they want to be a leader in the organization someday, is to work on those, what I'll call soft skills: emotional intelligence, political savvy, resource management. Some of the things that maybe aren't naturally comfortable for an engineer or an analyst, where they'll gravitate to, hey, I want to learn about the latest radar system or the latest satellite technology. Spend a little bit of equal time on the soft skills, how to be a good leader, how to be an empathetic leader, how to understand resources, how to navigate some simple things like a staff package. And I've seen brilliant scientists and engineers that have great ideas, but because they either don't have the right people skills, they hit a barrier in their career, or if they don't know how to navigate the business side of the house, they have difficulty getting their brilliant ideas to move forward.
Oh, I totally agree. think my one piece of advice with soft skills is learn how to communicate your personality on Teams or whatever, or Slack, or because sometimes you'll talk to someone on Teams and you'll be like, oh, this person isn't my cup of tea. But then you meet them in person and you're like, oh, we actually have a really good rapport. You just maybe use one too many periods in your communication.
Yeah, I think that personal connectivity and some of that was lost during the pandemic.
Absolutely,
where we struggled to move to the virtual. But I think always trying to understand it from the other person's view is critical. I think everybody brings something different to the table, and we should value that. And usually I found when you're frustrated with another officer at work or somebody outside of work, it's because you don't understand their perspective and they don't necessarily understand your perspective.
Yes. What's that Ted Lasso quote that's like, be curious, not judgmental? Or,
such a good show. And
that is such a good show.
I haven't heard that one, and my wife hates Ted Lasso, so I don't watch it at home.
Your wife hates Ted Lasso?
My wife hates Ted Lasso. Shh.
Oh my gosh.
Make sure that doesn't go on the air or I'm going to get trouble for timing her out.
Oh my gosh, I love Ted Lasso. I've watched it twice.
Oh, that's so funny.
Well, I appreciate what you were saying because I'm currently on a DoD project and I do not have a military background at all. And it's
really,
I know, really. It's an interesting because I do a lot of project management in my role. So like, I'm very comfortable, like the subject matter of doing the role, but I didn't have any, like I've had to rely on my coworkers to teach me about, like rankings. And it's interesting because some people are very formal with like coming from other projects that were not DoD, like sir, ma'am, very formal. But then in their data conversation, they are way less formal than other contracts I've been on just for like interpersonal communication and like phrases they'll use. So it's been an interesting learning curve of like exactly what you're saying, like the soft skills of a different agency.
Yeah, every organization has a different culture, no matter how small the team or how large the team, every organization has a different culture. And for me as a leader, probably one of the most interesting things is trying to better understand a culture, trying to figure out how to navigate within a culture, and then trying to help an organization that perhaps doesn't have the healthiest culture shift to a healthier culture. And for me, that's fun and challenging. Those are the kind of wicked hard problem sets I enjoy. Certainly not the technical engineering stuff, but I enjoy the soft problem sets like culture.
Oh, that's how I would be too.
Yeah.
We've talked about the younger generation a little bit. Do you see a lot of Gen Z or younger talent coming into your new role or not your role specifically, but where you're at?
So it's interesting. When I first visited the Missile and Space Intelligence Center a decade ago, we had a large preponderance of officers that had been here for, 2, 3, 4 decades. It is literally a badge of honor in our organization to be the longest serving officer within the Missile and Space Intelligence Center. So as I was preparing to make the argument of why I was the best candidate to lead this organization, and I started looking at some current stats, I was shocked to learn that 60% of our workforce is 40 and younger now. That's a huge dynamic shift from where it was 10 years ago. And you can see that. And it's a balance. It's an interesting balance now of new people bringing in fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. And then some of the folks that still have 20, 30 years experience. And it's interesting to see the younger generation come in and recognize the value that those people with 20, 30, 40 years of experience bring to the table. And then seeing some of the older generation recognize, hey, they have a new perspective. They've grown up with different technology. They've grown up in a different environment. And the way they value each other's input, it's really interesting. I think probably the Missile and Space Intelligence Center is unique because it's a Department of Defense intelligence community organization, but it's a science and technology organization. So they thrive on learning from one another. Just really interesting to see how much both the younger and the older generation blend together and value each other's views and opinions.
That's awesome. So my father-in-law has a long-standing career in insurance, and one of the meetings that he would talk about before retiring was he would do a reverse mentorship. So instead of, so it would be, you would be paired with sort of your counterpart of a different generation, and it wouldn't be necessarily like the traditional of maybe the younger person being like, how do I navigate my career, getting all these questions answered, but it was like the flip of like,
this is why you should download TikTok and learn a TikTok dance
like,
to market insurance.
Exactly. Like it's like a spin on like what was traditionally done. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. But then I feel like I wonder how like those meetings would go, because if you're like, if you're like 22 talking to someone who is typically, different generation, you might be nervous. So I like that they were.
I don't know. I don't think Gen Z is that nervous to talk to people.
Bold generation. Maybe it's millennials who are like.
But even if they did go to college during the pandemic, I feel like they are. Let me tell you why what you're doing is wrong.
Whereas millennials like, please like me. I will work so hard for you. Just be nice.
Yeah.
That is pretty funny. It's interesting though. With the generational indifference and how you see, we just had an intern do an outbrief. We assign an interns a project to do, and then they outbrief senior leadership, and we bring in our senior leaders from across the center. And it's amazing to see how candid and open they are and how comfortable they are with briefing the group. I almost wanted to retire last week after one of the interns briefed. I'm like, he's got it.
Bye.
Good hands, and it's just really interesting to see that dynamic. Really comfortable with challenging assumptions. I do think you bring up, Liz, an interesting point though on the reverse mentoring. I wish more people took advantage of that. And when people would ask me in leadership forums, name a couple of your mentors, some of them would be surprised when I mentioned my executive assistant and some other junior officers, because as a senior leader, let's face facts. Everybody wants to tell the emperor has clothes and they're beautiful and they're lovely and they have the perfect taste. It's really hard to find honest folks, the higher up you go in the organization, that are willing to tell you the reality and give you the information you need to hear, and not necessarily what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. So I think it's always important to have junior mentors, no matter how senior a leader you are, to understand what's a different generation feeling, what's a different layer of the organization feeling, because certainly somebody that's been with the organization 20 or 30 years and in a senior leadership position, their perspective and their experience is vastly different than that employee that's been with the organization for 6 months. And those perspectives and impressions are equally valuable, but I think sometimes as senior leaders, we get disconnected from the more junior folks and the newer employees. And maintaining that connectivity for me is just critical for understanding and understanding the organization and helping the organization move forward constructively.
Oh, that is nice to hear. I feel like our CEO is really good about that. He always, just recently went out with the interns that we had for lunch and make sure to talk to the interns that we have to hear their perspective of the projects they're working on. And I'm like, that's so smart to get a perspective from a new up and comer. I was like, all I did was talk to them about TikTok.
You did more than that. You gave a lot of mentorship.
Not this year.
I hope we're not going to do any TikTok scenarios.
Unfortunately, we are a part of the groups that had to delete TikTok from our phones, and it was a sad day for the marketing team.
And then as a true millennial, I watched it on Insta.
Listen, I'm not going to lie. When I go into labor, the second I feel a contraction, I am deleting Teams from my app, from my phone, and re-downloading TikTok.
There you go. I don't blame you. Well, you need that stress relief.
Exactly. I need that distraction.
Exactly.
This is not a segue at all, but I have a question for you with kind of balancing sort of various generations. So government at times has been known to be a little bit slow, maybe not adopt some of the, things.
Newest technology.
Yes. Thank you for filling in.
You're welcome. Yeah.
How do you balance that working in an organization that, you guys are an innovative organization. You have to be, it's rapid response, but then also, again, balancing people who've been there for 40 years and then someone who's been there for 6 months. There are a lot of things that you have to balance with that sphere. How do you juggle all of that while still moving in an innovative way?
Yeah, certainly that's a challenge. I won't lie to you. Being in the government and especially in the intelligence community, there are a lot of rules and regulations for a lot of good reasons, especially in the intelligence community. When you're dealing with the most sensitive information and exposure to some of that information actually can put lives actually at risk.
Yeah.
And not only always U.S. lives, it could be foreign partners' lives at risk. You got to take that very serious. So that's a challenge for us for sure, especially when adopting new technology on our networks and things like that. We've got to make sure that it's trusted, it's vetted, it'll operate effectively. There's no vulnerabilities in that. So that does make it a challenge. Then the other challenge for us, especially in the Missile and Space Intelligence Center, is we are providing guidance and direction to the acquisition community on types of weapon systems they should be developing, types of countermeasures to foreign weapon systems. And these weapon systems take decades to develop and field and actually put out there. So when we're providing information either to the acquisition community or to the warfighters that are actually, flying planes, trying to avoid some of these missile systems that we are responsible for tracking and analyzing, that's a lofty weight and a responsibility. And so those cases,
I'm already sweating.
I know, I'm sweating thinking about being in charge of that too.
When you think about the fact that we might have a pilot that's flying a weapon system that's been in development for 20 years.
Wow.
And then we're trying to provide analysis and input to that pilot on a system that our adversary has been developing for 15 or 20 years. And how do we make sure we give them the best data possible to make sure that they come home safely? That's a heavy responsibility.
Yes.
And so in those cases, we have to be very dogmatic about our approach on the engineering and analytics side and putting things in place. I found the Department of Defense and Intelligence community is really good in a crisis for innovation and finding ways to adopt new technologies in a crisis, which is great because, again, that's where we're focused on saving lives, and that's where we're willing to accept more risk. In peacetime, we're more risk adverse, and that's where we're more dogmatic about our approach to things. It certainly does make life a little harder for those in the intelligence community. There's certain things like Chat GPT that aren't widely available on a top secret network. That
might be for the best, to be honest.
It probably is until we get the kinks worked out of all that. But simple things like walking into a meeting. I'm sure when you all go to a meeting and it's an unclassified meeting, you've got a tablet or you've got a laptop with you, or maybe you're just using your smartphone. When you walk into a meeting in the intelligence community, everybody has a notepad and a pen or a pencil. So the fact that we're using kind of, in some cases, 1990 approaches to trying to solve problems in 2024 can be a little bit difficult. We do try and leverage our national research labs who are really focused on trying to be innovative in a safe, risk compliant way. So we do try and leverage that, but it certainly is a balancing act. And I think sometimes the government gets a bad rap and we forget about the fact that, we are trying to counter weapon systems that have been in place for 15 or 20 years and technology is advancing very quickly. And the fact that we're actually supporting weapon systems that took 20 or 30 years to develop. So I think sometimes it's unrealistic to think we're going to adopt technology that was just developed in the back of a garage, 3 weeks ago.
It's like some of us are still using Safari. Like we can't even get Chrome on our computer.
Exactly.
Internet Explorer. Actually, I think we did have to delete Internet Explorer from all computers recently. So
sadly, I think I'm looking down at my icons and I've got Internet Explorer and I think the only ones I can have are Internet Explorer, Chrome, and Firefox. But
Hey,
the tools I use at work sometimes are vastly different than what I use at home.
Yeah, that makes sense. During this conversation, you brought up that the work that you're doing, it is life or death. This isn't like, I'm posting on social media, I misspelled a word. Like this is someone's life. What motivated you to take on such a high impact, high mission role? And how do you stay focused and inspired to stay in a role that is very stressful?
I think everybody finds constructive ways to deal with stress. For me, from a young age, I always wanted to serve, and service is a value to me. My daughter jokes whenever she's home visiting and she tries to help, or help with something. And she goes, that's right. Your language of love is service.
Oh.
And I'm like, what are you talking about, language of love? But for me, service has always been important. Service to the country, service to a higher cause. I think a lot of people that join the military and stay in the Department of Defense and intelligence community have similar motivators. So first, that the service, sense of service to a higher purpose, has always been a motivating factor for me. So for that's where I derive my pleasure. So even though sometimes it is stressful, that's really where I get my reward and gratification from. I think that's where our engineers here and our analysts at MSIC get their gratification from too, is knowing that I'm helping someone else. I'm serving a higher cause. The folks here, their eyes actually light up when they talk about, a team that just came out of flying a bombing mission in the Middle East, and they go, and they get a text from a pilot at 2:00 in the morning going, hey, thanks for what you did today. My team all made it home safe.
Oh,
that's pretty incredible. That's inspiring. But it is stressful, that kind of weight and responsibility. Yeah. So finding constructive ways to deal with that. Personally, outside of work, I decompress. I try to separate work and home life. I intentionally have a long commute to and from work because it helps me decompress on the way home. And it helps me get energized in the morning and focused at work. So that way, when I'm at work, I'm focused at work. When I'm at home, I try to the best extent possible to be focused at work. But I do think it is that sense of higher purpose and serving something that's more important than just an individual or that one team is really what drew me to this line of work, and which motivates me to continue. Even if I retire from the intelligence community, I will in some way, shape, or form want to have a career, continue to have engagements where I have a sense of higher purpose and greater cause.
That is so.
It definitely takes a special kind of person to be able to do all of that. This is sort of, not to bring the Olympics into it, but Tom Daley, a British swimmer, is always seen on TV knitting in between his dives as like a stress relief. And his diving is not life or death in the Olympics, but do you have any hobbies like that just are kind of like just take your mind off of things?
Absolutely. So I love to cook. I do 99.9% of the cooking in the house. When I deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months, I came home and my wife joked, my youngest son was still living at home for a period of that time. And he joked about my wife not cooking. And my wife said, I cooked while your father was deployed. And he said, you microwaved, Mom. Dad cooks, you microwave. But I love to cook. So I go home at the end of the day and I'll make dinner every night. I love to cook on the weekends and things. Most of my free time is spent with my wife, my best friend. We've been together 37 years, as long as I've been working in the federal government. And I'm very introverted outside of work. So my pleasures outside of work to kind of decompress are watching movies, reading books. And when I've had a really stressful day at work and my wife can tell I'm a little bit stressed, she'll go play some video games and blow some stuff up. I love to play first-person shooter video games. And so sometimes that's a great way to decompress too. Just not online, because it's really embarrassing when a 7-year-old keeps you in college.
Plus, you don't want to hear a 7-year-old talk while you're playing a gun video game. Like, it's just
especially with some of the language that comes out of their mouth. I mean, they like to make me blush. Not only are they like humiliating me, they're making me want to cry with the language they use. So.
I'm like, is your mom around?
Is this your mom? No, she's using that language, and then you die again, and you have to respawn again.
Like, oh no!
It's humiliating.
I always think that like there's this whole conversation about video games, and I agree. I think they're kind of fun, but I haven't played one in such a long time. But you said first person POV, like shooting games. I just vividly remember my friends and I really loved playing on the GameCube, the 007 Nightfire POV.
I used to play GoldenEye and N64. Yeah.
Yes. I loved that. I am no one in my family owns a gun. Well, my brother-in-law does because he's military, but like my dad doesn't even hunt, and I'm from West Virginia. Like, we don't own guns. I've shot a gun once in my life. Like, and it was in a very controlled situation. So it's amazing that I very much enjoyed that game.
Probably didn't think about it, but think about how a game like GoldenEye teaches you how to deal with stress, deal with strategy, If you think about it, there's leadership lessons in there in addition to a whole lot of fun of just annihilating your friends and having bragging rights for doing that.
Yes. It was very fun. We would go between that game and like Kirby Fully Loaded, like those little pink fluffy things. So there was some good balance.
We did that in Mario Kart.
Oh, Mario Kart was good too.
Oh,
And Mario
Kart
Super
was
Ball,
classic.
where you're in the ball on the mazes and you can't like fall
yeah.
off the maze. That was another good one.
And like dropping the turtle shells for your friends to hit and stuff.
I wish we had a live version of that here around the workplace. That could be a lot of fun.
It really could. Well, speaking of video, this kind of seems off topic, but I know MetroStar has done this in the past, and I don't remember all of the details because it was way before my time, but using video games in other countries to teach training, to teach like language or to teach like combat, things like that. So I feel like maybe you could get video games installed.
Retirement plan unlocked right there.
Exactly. I'll have to look into that. Now that you mention it, we are trying to get a little bit more modern with our modeling and simulation, and maybe there's some future there to make it more game.
To do a 007, but it could be you instead of Pierce Brosnan, like little mini you.
I love it. Just put people's avatars.
A much better actor. I should have brought my avatar or my caricature that they did for me for the Hail and Farewell here at the Missile and Space Intelligence Center. I should have brought that in the room with me today, but I'll have to scan it in and send you a copy. I will.
We'll put it on the screen if we're allowed. Right?
Yeah, there might be a copyright issue. I'm a big fan of a certain institution, organization, company. I became infatuated with them back in January when I traveled to Tennessee to see a couple of my kids and some of my grandkids. And so they drew me with an emblem for Buc-ee's. And if you don't know what Buc-ee's is, you're missing a life experience.
I have never been to Buc-ee's, but I want to go so bad.
What is Buc-ee's?
Oh, would you like to explain what Buc-ee's is?
It is like an otherworld experience. I recommend you take a road trip from the Washington, D.C. area down to Nashville. On the way to not just that Nashville's a great place to visit, but on the way in Sevierville, Tennessee, until about a month ago, it was the largest convenience store in the world, held the Guinness Book of World Record.
I'll show you videos.
It's a gas station. It's like a Wawa.
Oh, it's like Wawa.
But it's on steroids. It is incredible. They've got the best brisket and barbecue, and it is fantastic. And they got this cool beaver mascot named Buc-ee, and he actually comes out in costumes sometimes in the store to visit the kids and stuff. And it is a whole nother experience.
I've never been, but it's on my bucket list.
My sister-in-law's bachelorette was in Dollywood. But I feel like we missed an opportunity.
You missed an opportunity. It's got the best brisket. You can buy like really phenomenal world-class brisket. You could buy a target for boar hunting, a fishing rod. You could buy crystal, wine glasses for the house. They've got a little bit of everything.
It's
at
for
Buc-ee.
everyone. It's like the one place in America where you could be Republican, Democrat, anything, and come together and just feel the Buc-ee love.
It's like a Meyer.
I don't know what a
Google
Meyer is.
it, and you'll see some videos about the experience.
I'll show you some videos after
yeah.
this.
Meyer's like a Target, but like with a full-on grocery store.
This is a Midwestern thing, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll scan in the caricature later, and I'll email it to you. But
Perfect. I feel like we just did a really big advertisement for Buc-ee's. I'm going to send this podcast to their marketing team and be like, you don't know me, but we talked about Buc-ee's for like 10 minutes.
And for the record, my congressional affairs, public affairs would be remiss if I didn't say that is my personal opinion. This is not the of the Missile and Space Intelligence Center or the Defense Intelligence Agency. This is just my personal opinion. Buc-ee's is amazing.
I love it.
So as we sort of start to wrap up, I do have a question. So you seem like a very big family man. You've talked very lovely about, your wife and your kids and your grandkids. 2 questions for you. What marriage advice do you have after almost 40 years together? And then,
dang, Liz,
I know, right to the heart. Went from Buc-ee's to right to the heart.
Wow.
And then, how have you juggled having such a successful, long-standing career with juggling a family?
Yeah. So the first, I think, I think to be successful in a marriage is similar to what you need to be successful in life and as a leader. Stay humble, be open to other people's opinions, be willing to subjugate your needs for somebody else's. Be open to communication. I think sometimes we're really aware of those kind of things in the workplace, but yet as individuals, we tend to treat our loved ones and our family members sometimes a little worse because we feel like we don't have to be on our best behavior. But always trying to stay humble and open to other opinions and being willing to change your mind as you get new information. Taking the higher road, realizing sometimes even if you're right, it's not going to help the situation.
Yeah. So, this is not worth it.
Yeah, you really have to choose your battles in marriage, just like you do in the rest of your life. So, also, I think it's important, and this is really hard when you're young and you're 18 or 19, you're in your early 20s, is marry your best friend. I don't know if we were best friends when we got married. I don't think so. We were certainly deeply in love and infatuated with one another. But for a lasting marriage, I think the important thing is really developing a friendship and honestly, that's what I love about the MSIC environment. You mentioned the family. MSIC has a really great family environment. They treat each other like family. That's one of the things that drew me to the Missile and Space Intelligence Center is just that family environment, that sense of camaraderie. If you asked my kids how I balanced, and my wife how I balanced having a career and then focusing on family, sadly, I'm afraid they might say poorly at some times. When you join the military, the expectation is that the military comes first, deployments come first, operational needs come first. I always tried to find deliberate times where when I was home, I was focused on being home. I don't know if I did that well. My kids all talk to me and the grandkids talk to me. So apparently I didn't do it.
Better than a lot of families.
You're doing way better than a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it's finding those balances, both personally. I think a 3-star that came to brief at DIA recently, or a year or two ago, he said, when you're home, give 100%. Give 100% of yourself when you're at home. And then when you're at work, give 100% at work. But I think that's hard for all of us to do, especially when you love what you do and you're passionate about what you do. I think sometimes the family takes the short end of the stick. Again, that's because sometimes, you think they expect that. So that's a really hard thing, I think, for all senior leaders to balance, is that family and mission. It's one of the reasons that drove me to MSIC, though, is it was realizing at a later part of my career that my grandkids are never going to remember what I did for the Defense Intelligence Agency, the United States Army, or the intelligence community. But they are really going to remember what kind of papa I was.
If you took them to Buc-ee's or not.
I will tell you, my granddaughter, I flew her back to Las Vegas on Saturday, and on Friday, I took the day of leave, and we had to do a final Buc-ee's trip. She's a Buc-ee's convert in the 30 days she spent.
I love that. I feel like she was going back to LA, and her friends were like, let's go to Air One. And she's probably like, have you guys heard of Buc-ee's?
Exactly.
I really feel like I missed out when I was in Tennessee.
We'll take a road trip.
Yeah, that sounds good.
You gotta stop. Good excuse. Go to Nashville. There's 2 Buc-ee's on the drive from DC to Nashville. You can experience them both.
Perfect. Well, we'll see if we can get it paid for by MetroStar.
I think we need to film an episode in Tennessee. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a good leadership lesson learned there on customer service and how to and how to deliver a superior customer service. So I think it's worthwhile. I think Buc-ee's someday will be teaching leadership classes like Disney World does.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. I feel like we've had a very wide range of topics.
Yeah, I'm going to tell the team here I worked in Buc-ee's, and they're not going to be surprised.
Well, for a lot of episodes, we worked in Taylor Swift, so no judgment.
Oh, my granddaughter's a Swiftie, so I wouldn't judge.
She'll be in good company.
Yeah. We're Swifties too. She's a Swiftie by marriage, and I'm just a Swiftie.
Yeah.
There's a lot to admire there. It's pretty incredible, talented lady. So
She should be teaching leadership classes.
Oh, yeah. And business classes.
Yep.
And marketing and law.
Just phenomenal. And seems so down to earth.
Yeah.
It goes back to that thing I mentioned about always try and stay humble.
Yeah.
She epitomizes that.
Yes.
She just connects as a real person. And yeah.
Agreed. I'm glad we got some Taylor Swift
We
content.
really
in there
had
as
the
well.
whole
Yeah.
spectrum.
Worked it all in. Now you can send this episode to your granddaughter and be like, we talked about Taylor Swift?
I can. And make her watch the whole thing. So make sure you put the Taylor Swift at the end so she has to listen to the whole thing.
Be like, tell me when you get to that part, and she'll be at like minute 55 and be like, Granddad. Well, thank you so much. We had a great time.
I did as well. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Would you like to lead it away with your little outro, Liz?
Yeah. So once again, thanks for joining us. We had like we just said, we covered a wide variety of topics. And for our listeners, we hope you enjoyed the episode, and we hope you like, subscribe, and listen and join us for our next podcast.
That was perfect.